We all live by rules, especially when the stakes are high. They're supposed to give us a clear path to success. But what if the very rules you think are helping you are actually setting you up to fail? Today, we're going to dig into some of the most sacred principles of warfare to uncover the hidden and often catastrophic cost of being inflexible. All right, let's get into it.
And look, at its core, this isn't really about military history. It's about making huge decisions when you just don't have all the facts. This quote right here frames our entire conversation. Think of this whole thing as a masterclass in strategy, where getting that resource allocation wrong has the ultimate price tag. So this is the big question we're tackling today. We're going to seriously challenge the idea that any fixed set of rules can work in a world that's constantly changing. We're just going to follow the data and see what happens when that old-school dogma smacks right into reality.
Okay, so to kick things off, we're going to look at a few of these bedrock principles of war. We'll put the rigid, traditional way of thinking right up against a much more adaptive one. And trust me, you're going to start to see a pattern emerge, and fast.
First up, concentration of force. You know, the classic textbook idea. You pile up all of your strength in one spot and you just punch through. Simple, right? Well, the adaptive alternative is something called fluidity. Acting more like water, flowing around the strong points and hitting the weak spots as soon as they appear. And wow, does this data tell a story. On the left, you've got the Battle of the Somme in 1916. Pure concentration. The casualty ratio was 1.25. That means the attackers lost more people than the defenders. And for what? No decisive outcome. Now look at the right. Desert Storm. A perfect example of fluidity. The ratio? An absolutely stunning 0.01. And a decisive victory in just 100 hours.
Just let that sink in for a second. The adaptive approach wasn't just a little bit better. It was 11 times more efficient at getting the job done while saving lives. That is a massive, massive difference in performance.
Okay, let's keep going and see how this pattern builds. Let's talk about unity of command. Traditionally, this means one person at the very top is calling all the shots. It's totally centralized. The adaptive version? That's decentralized command. It's where leaders give their teams a clear mission, the what, and then trust them to figure out the how. Now, what's so incredible here is that we're looking at two different sides in the exact same battle in 1940. The French, with that rigid top-down command structure, had a casualty ratio of almost 15-1, and they collapsed. The Germans, on the other hand, who empowered their commanders on the ground, had a ratio of just 0.07 and won a decisive victory. Think about that. It wasn't the tanks or the terrain, it was the doctrine. It was how they thought. The performance gap here is it's almost unbelievable. An 87-fold improvement in efficiency. This wasn't just a slight edge. It was a complete systemic advantage that let one side adapt and pounce on opportunities in real time, while the other side was completely paralyzed, just waiting for orders. So, okay, two principles down. And you can already see where this is going, right? But this isn't about just a couple of hand-picked examples. The evidence for this pattern, well, it cascades across the entire history of strategic thinking.
And this pattern, it just repeats over and over again. Instead of just hoping for surprise, the adaptive approach builds overwhelming superiority so you can win even when they know you're coming. Instead of a relentless, exhausting offense, you use an active defense to wear down the other guy before you strike the final blow. It replaces a brittle kind of simplicity with requisite complexity, which basically means making plans that are tough enough to handle the real world, not ones that shatter on first contact. And it's true for every single principle, from how you secure your forces, to the speed of your operations, to using maneuver instead of just grinding the enemy down. In every single case, the rigid rule fails and the adaptive alternative wins. And here it is, all the evidence in one place. Just look at those improvement multipliers. 87x, 70x, 39x. These aren't just numbers on a page. They represent a massive reduction in wasted effort, wasted money, and wasted lives. This isn't some fluke. It is a fundamental truth that holds up across the entire doctrine of strategy.
So we've seen the pattern. It's undeniable. But the real question is why? Why does this happen? What's the root cause behind this huge performance gap? Well, it all comes down to the hidden cost of uncertainty.
This chart, right here, pretty much sums up everything we've been talking about. The average casualty ratio for those rigid doctrines, about 2.3. For the adaptive ones, it's 0.15. That huge gap between the bars, that's waste.
It's wasted lives, wasted resources, and wasted time, all because a rigid plan met a world that refused to follow it.
So let's actually put a name to this. Let's call it systemic waste. It's that friction you get when your rulebook doesn't match the game you're actually playing. And it's not bad luck. It's a predictable outcome when you try to apply inflexible solutions to problems that are constantly in motion. And this is a challenge that goes way, way beyond the battlefield. And this brings us to the final and most important point. What does all of this mean for you? For any leader in any organization who's trying to navigate a future that is anything but certain. Here's the bottom line. The lesson from all this is so clear. It doesn't matter if you're in a boardroom or on a battlefield. Your real opponent isn't the other company or the other team. It's your own rigidity. It's the outdated ways of doing things, the assumptions you never question, and the sacred rules that stop you from adapting to what's happening right now.
And so that's the question I want to leave you with. Every company, every organization has its own principles of war. You know, the way we've always done things around here. The data we've looked at today should force us all to ask a really tough question. What are your sacred rules, and what is the real hidden cost of clinging to them in a world that just refuses to stand still?